All right, in this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to use dataset parameters. Let's jump over to SQL Server Management Studio, and I want to point out that as your queries and dataset needs become more complex, it makes sense to create reusable objects within the database that you can use for reporting. You don't have to spend a lot of time writing complex queries. One, if the work has already been done, or two, if you have a DBA, database developer, or someone else on your team who can do that work for you. And it makes sense to work with others in this regard. Now, if you're a one-person shop and you're managing the database and the reporting and you're going to be wearing all of those hats, then if you have permissions in your database to create objects, then that's a good idea as well. So I want to show you that when we had set up the course, I had you run a script that generated all of these views. The view that we're going to be using is this VW stock category order history. I can right click on that and script that, say drop and create to a new query editor window. There you can see the logic of this view. So essentially this is a query not unlike some earlier queries we created using the query designer, where we are joining some tables together, we're grouping, we're ordering by, we're returning some aggregate and grouped columns. So all of that is taken care of in that view, and now I can just use the name of the view as if it were a table, and I don't have to worry about this logic anymore. The other object that you may frequently use is a stored procedure. And again, we had generated this stored procedure for demonstration purposes. Stored procedures can be used to not only return data, but also to insert, update, and delete records and perform maintenance on a database. And they are recommended for both efficiency and for security purposes. This stored procedure actually encapsulates the where or filtering logic by passing in parameters. So you see that the procedure itself, called USP for user stored procedure stock history, has 3 parameters. Those parameters just are used in the where clause right down here to perform various filtering and to return the appropriate set of data. So I just need to know what those objects are called, and I need to know what parameters to pass to them. So let's jump over to the report design. I've just created a simple report with this shared data source, and now I'm ready to create a new data set. Now this is going to be an embedded data set using that data source. I'll just use the default name for now, but I'm going to use the query designer. I'll edit as text. Now, just to save time, I've already written this query and copied it to the clipboard, but I'll just talk you through the logic. Here you can see I'm doing a select star, meaning select all of the available columns from this view where the order date is between. And as I'm typing this query, I'm just going to make up a parameter name, preceded with an @ symbol. Between @date from, and then I make up another parameter called @date to. Put this in parentheses so that it is executed as a single statement. Then I have an AND operator. So for any records where this is true, and for any records where these 2 statements are true, again, in parentheses, controls the order of operations, where the audience column is equal to a parameter that I made up called @audience. It's completely coincidental that I'm using the column name. Or where my @audience parameter value is the literal text all. I've actually created another view that adds a record to the results with that value all, which is just a way of saying just return all the records when I choose that value. And then I'm going to order the results. So let's go ahead and run that. You can see that the query designer generates those parameters. I'll go ahead and give them values. Let's do 131. Oops, 131, 2015. And I'll go ahead and just use the word all in parentheses. And that's going to return a set of data. Notice that my audience right here, I have several records where there is no audience value. If I were to run this again and choose DBA as my audience, I'm only going to see products that are designed for DBAs. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click OK to accept that. Again, I would normally give that data set a name that makes sense. Let's call it report data. Name doesn't really matter in this simple report so much, but it just needs to be something that makes sense. And I'm going to create one more data set. This will be used to drive the audience parameter list. So I'm going to call it audience list. Select star from the name of that view, VW stock item audience, which returns my audience members along with that all value that I built into my view. All right, and now we're good to go. Now I'm going to create a simple matrix report, and I'm going to kind of pound through this real quickly. It'll be designed very much like the matrix report I used in my last demonstration. So to do that, I'll just add a new matrix. I'm going to give that some space for reasons that will be very apparent here in a few minutes. And I'm going to add my calendar year, my month label as a secondary row group, my order date as a row group, my category as a column group. I'm going to add the sales quantity as data. We'll go ahead and make those bold, make those bold, just work backwards and format this. That's a number with no decimal positions. I want the order date to be formatted as a date. I'm going to go ahead and just shorten the labels. And then I need to deal with the ordering of the month group values. All right, so that's good enough to get us started. Everything's formatted the way that I like. I'll go ahead and just give that an attractive background color. Now, you can see that I'm prompted for my parameter values. My default value for audience is all. If I were to say DBA, notice the category of products. As we saw before, for DBAs, we only have mugs. In fact, that's actually the case for a number of these audience members, so that is working. Now I need to change my audience parameters so that it gives me a list. And this still remains a single select parameter. I will go to the available values and say that the available values are based on a query. It's going to be the audience list query. There's only one column or field. All right, so there's my drop-down list. And here's my calendar picker. And so we can see that that's working correctly. Now, the last thing that I want to do in this report is when my user runs the report, let's say that they're going to print it or export it, I want them to know what they had selected. And so to do that, I can go to my parameters and just drag and drop those parameters to create corresponding text boxes. And rather than adding multiple text boxes, I can use placeholders And I can put them within the same text box. Click outside that text box. And then I can also insert text boxes to be used as labels. Just copying and pasting there. And then we'll want to format those dates, format the dates, and voila. Now my user knows what they had selected, even if they're looking at a static copy of the report. We'll explore two different techniques to implement report interaction and navigation. The first is called drill down to detail. This is done in a single report with a data set that must return all of the detail records. Data is organized in a table or a matrix with groups where all but the top level group are hidden with toggle items set on different fields. The groups and details are hidden from view, and then the visibility of those lower level groups is toggled using a parent group field. Here's an example. In the orders by customer for year table report, you can see that records are grouped by month, then by state province, then by customer. With the state, province, and customer records hidden by default, we would see only summary information for each month. The user can select a month to expand and view all the states and provinces, and then expand a state to be able to see the customer detail records. In a drill through to detail scenario, at least two reports are involved. The top level report just shows summary information. That data set only needs to return the summary records. The details are in a different report. The summary report then has an action which allows the user to navigate from the summary report to the detail report, passing parameters that show details only for the selected parameter value. In this example, the order category history report is my summary report. The user clicks on a category, which then navigates them to the stock on-hand details, showing them only detail records for that category. Here's an example of a drill down in a table report. As you can see, we have three different groups, and I'm showing the group properties window for the customer group. As you can see, the customer group is hidden, and then a toggle item is set on the state province field. Two demonstrations follow about creating report interactions. Demo 2 for this module, adding drill down interactions to a multi-group table. And then we'll take a look at creating a drill through report interaction using two different reports. As you've already seen, the great balance in building operational reports is managing details and summary information. And earlier when we wrote the original query for this report, it was a little more detailed than it should have been. It brought back way too many records. And so I simplified the data set, and that resulted in bringing back far fewer records. But my data is in summary form. So let's take a look at this report. Again, you'll see that for each month within a selected year, I'm grouping by state, and then just for that state, we're showing the quantity and the total excluding tax, and then that calculation for the percentage of the month I had created in the last demonstration. So I'd like to go ahead and add another level of detail. So I'll go back to Design and right-click on my data set and choose Query. And I'll go ahead and go back to the Graphical Query Designer. You'll recall that I had simplified this query before by removing the customer. I'm going to go ahead and add the customer back to the report. I want to make sure that this is in the right order. So in the logical order of the fields as they want them to appear within the grouped rows in the table, I'm going to place the customer right here. And I just want to double check that I'm grouping by the customer. First by month, then by state, then by customer. Remember that I have my calendar, I've got my month name, and then I have my calendar month number just so I can sort by that. So that is all I need to do here. So that will add the customer back to my data set. The order of the fields in the data set really doesn't matter here. There's just one little thing that bugs me here. I'd like to give my data set a name that makes sense. So I'll just call it report data. You'll probably see that default data set name surface in some of the other sample reports I've already created for demos. But I'll go ahead and drag and drop. Remember, I need to have my table selected to see the row and column groups, but I'm going to drag and drop the customer down below state province, but above details. Now, with the customer here, you'll recall that I had created subtotals earlier. I'm going to go ahead and create a total after. That'll add yet another total right here. Go ahead and make that bold just like I did before. Let's make sure that this makes sense. And it does. I've got all of my customers, then I have the total for that customer, then I have a state, and at the end of all of the states, I'll need to go to the last page. I have a total for all of the states. Since I only have one calendar year selected, then I have a grand total right here. So that's good. The problem is that it takes 26 pages to run this report now, and I'd like to make that a little easier on the eye, a little easier for a user to consume it. And so it would really be nice if I could just see the total for the month. And then if I'm interested in seeing the states within that month, then I'd just like to see the total for the state. And then if I'm interested in seeing the individual customers, then I'd like to drill down to that detail. And that's what we call a drill down report. It's just a method of navigation within a single report that allows me to collapse grouped sections and view the summary information by default. It's actually pretty easy to do. I'm just going to go down to my customer group, and I'll left click on that little down arrow. This is the same thing as right clicking here, but I'm going to left click on this down arrow and go to group properties and the visibility page. And I want to say that I want to hide this group by default, and then I'm going to toggle the visibility based on a report item. Since I dragged and dropped fields to create the groups, it actually created text boxes with the same field names. So what I'm selecting now are actually the name of the text boxes. That's what it means by report item. And so here I want to hide the customer and then toggle it based on the state province, the group that's just above it. So I choose state province and click OK. Let's do the same thing with state province. I'll left click on the down arrow, go to group properties, visibility, hide, and then the state province group will be toggled based on the month. And I'll choose month. Let's run that. Okay, this is the effect that I was looking for. I see the year collapsed and just showing the months with the group totals. I can click on one of the little plus signs that expands the month. That shows me the states within that month. And then I can expand a state and see all of the customers within that state. So that functionally, that's a great drill down report. The only other thing that I would like to change is that we see the word total repeated over and over again. And it would really make more sense to see something a little more informative here. So I'm going to go back to my design, and in place of the word total, we'll go ahead and just make this a little more intuitive. So we know that that's our grand total. That's the total of everything at the very bottom. Might make sense for me to change the background color, make that just a light colored gray. Actually, let's go to more colors, and I can choose something even more subtle than that. I have found that when using gray and other light colors that they appear darker when you run the report. That's the right color there. But I typically err on the side of making background colors lighter than I think that I need to. And when you get into a place where you want to have different shades of colors, it takes a little bit of time to get those coordinated, because you may end up with one that's much darker than you wanted to. All right, so here, instead of total, I'm going to use a simple expression. I'm going to add a placeholder before the word total, and I'm going to choose the month. And then put a space right there. Okay, here I'll do the same thing with the state province. I'll place the cursor in front of the word total, create a placeholder. For the value, I'll choose the state province. And then again, it's hard to see here, so I'll expand that for now. I want to have a literal space right there, but I need to change that back so my report's not too wide. Guess I can't do that. I'll go ahead and move this over and run the report. And there you see that there is the total for January. Within the total for January, there we see each of the totals for each of our states. And see, this label right here becomes a placeholder for the customer. Since we're hiding the customer, we still need to show the column, so we need something in that text box. I've also had cases where I've just made this blank since it's redundant with the value in this column over there. So that's creating a drill down report. Drill through is facilitated by navigating from one report to another, typically passing parameters, so the second report is filtered or shows information in the context of the first report. Let's demonstrate the functionality first, and then I'll quickly show you how it's done. I have a report called Order Category History. It shows me sales information of my orders by date and then by the category of my different stock items. I'm going to change my audience from all to DBA. And you can see that I only have one category with products that are specifically for DBAs. I want to see what products exist within that category and what the available stock items and prices are. So I'll click on the mug category. That navigates to the stock on hand details report. You can see that it passed today's date. It also passed the category and the audience parameter. And then I'm seeing these details. Let's look at how it works. I'm going to go back to design view. Now this is for my first report. You need to get used to when you're previewing and you navigate to the second report, when you go to design, it opens up the first report. First of all, let's take a look at the report that I'm navigating to. Here's the report that I'm navigating to. It has three parameters: category, audience, and stock effective date. So I want to create a report action. I do that in the text box properties. So here I've navigated to the report that I want to navigate to, and then I can select each of the parameters in that target report. For the category parameter, I'm just going to pass my category field. For the audience parameter, I just want to pass the same parameter in the source report. To do that, rather than selecting the field from this list, I use the expression builder to select the parameter. There I would select the audience parameter to create that expression. For the stock effective date, I just want to pass today's date. To do that, I can use an expression, and I'm just going to use the today function. So you can see three different types of values that I'm passing into my destination parameters. And then I just changed the color of the text box to blue because Reporting Services doesn't visually indicate that a report action is in place. When I preview that report, you'll see that it's blue, and then when you hover over the text, you can see that it also gives you the finger icon. So that's report drill through. Module 6, Report Expressions and Advanced Design. Last week you saw how to build some very simple reports using the wizard and other very basic report design techniques. We're going to raise the bar a little bit and talk about more advanced and visual report design. I'll introduce parameters, and we'll talk about using parameters with advanced data sets with more complex business logic and filtering logic built into queries and other types of data sets. So I'll demonstrate using parameters with these advanced data sets. I'll introduce report interactions and navigation from one report to another, passing parameters so that we can maintain the filter context based on any parameters selected in a summary report, navigating to a detail report. And then I'll review interactive design options, which include drill down from summary to detail within a single report, or drill through from a summary report to a detail report. Two demonstrations follow about creating report interactions. The first is showing you how to create a drill down report, and the second will be navigating from one report to another in a drill through report action. Then you'll work on a lab. You're going to create some paginated report designs on your own, and then we'll wrap up with a knowledge check. Advanced and visual report design. So visual and conventional reports use the same foundational design principle. Highly visual reports that are based on charts, scorecard indicators, spark lines, the kinds of things we're going to get into next week, are really based on the same fundamental design principles as more textual reports, table and matrix reports that we've been working with and will work with in the next couple of modules. Those foundational principles and building blocks include groups, expressions, and parameters. I'll add to that list actions and interactions which allow you to navigate and interact with reports. Advanced report designs provide the ability to interact with a report so that the report experience is not static. It's not just something that we print or view on a screen. We can create reports that allow a user to be able to investigate details, to understand summary information, and then drill down into details, or navigate from one report to another report by filtering, choosing options, and then clicking to navigate so that they can see the detail that explains the numbers that they're seeing. This also gives us the opportunity to consolidate multiple reports. A common problem that we see within organizations that have been creating reports for a number of years is that the number of reports just continue to grow over time. So by using more advanced techniques and by carefully planning our report designs using these features and techniques, we can create fewer reports with more capabilities that provide a richer, more intuitive and valuable experience. Queries and reusable database objects. Now, first of all, understand that depending on your role, your environment, and the data source that you're working with, you may or may not have the opportunity to create reusable objects that are stored within your database. So you always have the option to create queries within the report designer. Whether you're using Report Builder or using SQL Server data tools, you can design fairly complex queries within the report design experience. But views and stored procedures, what we call reusable database objects, may be more efficient. And once you've designed that complex database object, or maybe it's been designed for you by a database administrator or a SQL developer, then that object can be reused with much less effort than redesigning the query again. One of the advantages of using reusable database objects like views and stored procedures is that it separates roles within a team effort. So again, the database administrator or SQL developer may be charged with writing those complex queries, and then the report designer simply consumes data. It's important for both parties to understand the usability and to understand the requirements, but by working together, we can get things done in a more efficient manner. If you're going to be writing queries against SQL Server data sources, then you need to understand T-SQL. And this course will introduce some T-SQL. You've already seen a little bit, but we're not going to go deep into query authoring techniques. If you're getting started and you're going to be creating reports against SQL Server, and all of those queries aren't going to be written for you by another member of your team, it would behoove you to develop some query skills using T-SQL. And that can be either simple or complex. I would recommend any of the books from MS Press written by Itzik Ben-Gan. And you'll find that he's written a number of books at beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels for different versions of SQL Server. And so it would be good just to look into. Using database objects can simplify dataset design. And datasets, which are essentially encompass a query that returns data for a report, can either be embedded into a report, meaning that you write and create the data set and it belongs just to one report, or you can create a data set and then share that out as a shared object on your report server, which is then called a shared data set. And when we introduce mobile report design, you'll see how we create only shared data sets for mobile reports. Well, this brings us to report parameters, and you're going to see how parameters are created within a query and then stored in a data set and then used within the report as report parameters in this upcoming demonstration. Report parameters can be single select or they can be multi-select. And the way that you write the query is going to depend on what you want that user experience to be. If you only want the user to be able to select one category or select one product perhaps, then the where clause or the filtering logic within that query would be different than if you were to allow the user to select multiple items and filter on those items. Parameters can have a drop-down list which allows the user to select one or more items from a list, and we create data sets to drive those parameter value lists, and I'll show you how to do that. A common technique is to add an additional item to the parameter list called an all placeholder or an all filter member, which essentially allows the user just to select one item, indicating that they want to filter on all of the values in a parameter list rather than making the user click every object or use a select all feature. Cascading parameters are parameters based on queries that are filtered on another parameter. So we can use cascading parameters to allow the user to select, let's say, a category, and then the product parameter list is filtered based on the category. This way we can guide the users through their selection of parameters by using multiple parameters that have dependencies on each other. Always use the correct data type when setting parameters. You'll see this in the demonstration. An important principle is that there is a difference between report and dataset parameters. Now, when you design a simple report with a simple data set, a lot of this is done for you. But by understanding the mechanics of parameters, you can better understand how you can utilize them in more advanced designs. On the right side, we see the report data window with the report parameters generated from a data set called order history. I also have the dataset properties window open to the parameters page. When you write a query with inline parameters, this generates dataset parameters. So within my query, as I reference these three different parameters just within my T-SQL, the query designer automatically generates a dataset parameter for each of those parameters that I had created within my query. In this case, date from, date to, and audience. The report designer then adds three corresponding report parameters, which you see in the parameters list here in the report data window. Those are mapped to the dataset parameters viewed on the left side of the dataset properties. These are mapped up together so that our report parameters pass values to the dataset parameters, which in turn are passed into the query. Again, in a simple dataset, this is all done for you, but it's important to understand the mechanics of this process. Let's take a look at a demonstration now.